Hello, you are listening to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we talk about films we think might be underrated or underseen. I'm the host for this week, Josh Hallam, and I'm joined as ever by my co-host, Alice Oliver. It was Alice's turn to choose the film this week, and she chose Action Force, the movie from 1987. So, well, let's see what we think. Alice, we'll talk about this week's film in a minute, but first, I just want to tell you guys at home about our Patreon page. So if you're listening to this and you think I'd like a little bit of extra content, or I'd like bonus content, or I'd like some access to a day early, I'd like ad-free episodes, I'd even like to maybe suggest a film for everybody for us to do. If you head on over to patreon.com/justfilms, and that'll click the link in the episode description, and you will see all the tiers there. Tiers start at £1 a month, and all tiers include ad-free extended episodes with access to them a day early. So you'll be supporting the podcast, you'll be helping us out, but you know what? We just appreciate that you listen. So anyway, Alice.
Yes, Josh.
So we've got a bit of explaining to do on this one.
Don't want anyone to get confused.
You don't want anyone to get
crystal
confused.
Clear.
It's a real doozy of a choice this week. I'm absolutely fascinated to know why you picked this one. So tell the listeners at home what we need to explain, tell them what it's about, and tell them why you bloody well picked it.
So, as Josh mentioned, this week's film is Action Force, but that was the European or maybe just the British title release over here, whereas over in America, hello to all our friends across the pond, this is G.I. Joe, the movie, and it's the animated movie, and this was a direct-to-video animated film that acted as a sequel to the TV show G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero. So, G.I. Joe are an elite special operations unit for the US Armed Forces, and in this film, they are faced with the threat of Cobra La, which is a terrorist organization that used to be a whole civilization that dominated the planet about 40,000 years ago until humans pushed them to the edges, and now they are out for revenge.
Oh.
So, why did I pick this one? Well, I think this film is underrated, and I 100% think that this film is underseen, because I don't know about you, Josh, but this is not an easy one to get hold of. And after all my research and explorations, I am pretty sure the only place you can watch this film is on YouTube.
Yeah,
and it's just not available on any streaming services.
I mean, I looked to the point where I had to send you the YouTube link and go, is this it?
Is this it?
And then you went, yes, that is it. Because I have the images of watching it and going, and then you go, oh no, it's not that one.
Yeah,
you know
well, because there's a few, because of the IP, because of the G.I. Joe name as well, there's a few different things, and obviously it was a TV show first and that.
And the live action 2 or 3, there's 3 of them,
absolutely, yeah. So yeah, it was quite a difficult one to get hold of. So this was one very similar to my relationship with Ewoks, where I do believe that my dad got this video from a car boot sale, just, completely randomly, not really knowing. Yeah, exactly. Not really knowing anything about it or, the wider context of it. And me and my brother just absolutely loved it. We thought it was the coolest thing ever. But obviously, I only found out because this has been on my list for a long time.
Right.
And I only found out when I very initially looked up, the scores and stuff around it, that it was also G.I. Joe, the movie. Like, I didn't realize that. Obviously, I've got no prior knowledge of G.I. Joe. That isn't something that was in our household.
So I don't know if it was. So you didn't watch the TV show or anything?
No, nothing like that. And I don't know if that was a thing in the UK, like if G.I. Joe was.
I think the toys were, but I don't know, because it's 1987. It's a little bit before our time. So you've obviously watched it very much after the fad had ended.
Well, when people were selling the videos at car boot sales, right?
Yeah, it's not about G.I. Joe anymore. Let's sell it on a car boot sale, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
So, okay, right. So it's underrated, it's underseen, and you got a lot of affection for this one. As soon as I started watching it, I thought this is another Battle for Endor, Ewoks Battle for Endor. Yeah, I thought this is it's another one. Not in the sense of like it was exactly the same scenario with the video. I just, that childhood nostalgia that I used to watch this. I don't know where it came from.
Exactly.
I was the same. The amount of times you'd go, and especially because my parents were separated as well, you'd go or one of your parents had bought summer off the market, a car boot sale, just been given it. you know,
Yeah,
all that
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
stuff. So yeah, so okay, well, let's get stuck into talking about it then. So we've explained the little discrepancy, we've explained the general concept. So let's start with the likes, like we always do. Now, I reckon you've got plenty to say on this one. So
Yes, I
what?
do have plenty to say on
Go on.
this.
So go on then. Watching it again. What did you like about it? Did it still tick that nostalgia box?
I mean, 100%, to be honest. There is quite a lot that I like about this film. I like the aesthetic, I like the characters. I think some of the voice acting is really good. And there are some elements of the script that I thought were really impressive. And I think it keeps up a pretty good pace throughout as well. So I'll start with the aesthetic, and I'm going to lump the sound in with this as well. So not only is it very colourful and creative with some of the characters, but Cobra La use a lot of like biological stuff as like tools and vehicles and weapons. And I really like this element of it. It's quite creepy and otherworldly. And I read someone describe it as like Lovecraftian, which I'd never really thought of before, but that is sort of what it feels like. And I like what that does to the audience's feelings about Cobra La, like as a civilization or as an organization, because they come across as very alien, but they aren't. They're just ancient. You know, these were things that were here long before we were. And I quite like the gravity of that. And I suppose the depth that it creates around these characters. And I touched on the sound there as well. And not only did I thoroughly enjoy the music, but I think that the soundscape in general is really strong. So the sounds of guns and helicopters, doors to secret facilities opening and closing.
A lot of good lasers.
We'll get onto the lasers. We're gonna talk about the lasers.
If you like a laser, it's
this
like
is for you.
Proper running around the playground vibes.
Pew pew,
yeah,
pew 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 pew.
But anyway, sorry, go on.
Pretty much exactly it. But all of that just felt really strong to me and made the film feel really full, and like a lot of attention had been paid to the smaller details, and I did really appreciate that. Before I go on, Josh, I'm gonna guess that you hadn't seen this one. Right?
No. So I hadn't seen it before. I knew what G.I. Joe was. Mm-hmm. But I didn't, in the same way I know like what Thundercats is and He-Man and all that sort of stuff. But no, I'd never seen it before. As I say, it's probably a little bit before our time in terms of watching it on telly and stuff like that. So no, I knew nothing about it. Before I give any feedback on the film, I should just say a few things. I went in completely blind to this. I know nothing about the franchise. I thought G.I. Joe was a bloke and not a team.
I thought he was a bloke too. I didn't think it was like a group.
I assumed that this would just be the feature length episode of the cartoon. But I don't know. Never seen the cartoon. And obviously, again, just to frame anything I say, which this sounds like I'm going to be negative, which I'm not necessarily going to be negative, but as we do with all films of this nature, we're not the target audience now. So we're talking about, I'm talking about this from someone who knows nothing about the sort of the wider franchise, and I'm not the target audience. So I did just want to be clear on that. But no, I'd not seen this, knew about the TV show, knew nothing about it, didn't know it existed.
Okay, so your general consensus there?
So I think there's plenty to like in there. So I think the first thing I want to say before I get to the specifics would be, if this had caught me at the right time, it'd be a bit of me.
Yeah,
because I think a lot of stuff like this, it just depends when it catches you.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely, I felt that way about Hunchback.
Yeah.
So
sure. Because it caught me at the right time. It didn't catch you at the right time. I think I absolutely loved Pokemon and Digimon. When I was about 8 or 9, and that caught me at the right time. I reckon if I went back and watched it now, it wouldn't really, do anything for me apart from the fact that I'm not the target audience. So so I reckon if this had caught me at the right time, or if you were interested in the franchise, if you were a fan, I reckon this probably ticks most of the boxes for you. Like you say, just to touch on the aesthetic, really, really colourful. Like thought it was really colourful. Every single character looks different. So obviously there's no like uniform. It's almost like, so I'll come back to this, but I love the idea of what it seems to be is that everyone in the team G.I. Joe, which is a team and not a guy, which we learned today.
Also known as Action Force.
Sorry. It seems to be that what they do is they target you. So if you're really good at something, so one of the characters in it, who's not in the TV show, he's sort of a character created for the film, is on the hero side is the Green Beret guy.
Mhm.
And he is Duke.
Lieutenant Falcon.
Lieutenant Falcon. And he is Duke, who is the most probably well-known G.I. Joe character.
Mhm.
He's his half-brother, right?
Yeah.
And he's created for the film, and he's voiced by Don Johnson from like Knives Out, Miami Vice, and stuff like that. But he's a Green Beret. So all through the film, he wears a Green Beret uniform. And there are other people who, one of them, is it Jinx? She seems to be some sort of martial artist or ninja or something. So she wears her and it's almost like they've got, you know, like when you first show up for a new job and you go, what should I wear? And they just go, it's just, you know, smart casual.
Yeah.
Or just wear whatever you're comfy in. And then like everyone's showing up for their first day of G.I. Joe in whatever they were recruited in. A little bit, I suppose a little bit like if you think of a superhero team, they all just show up in their costumes, right? And their costume, you know, what they're wearing in this is very much seems like a costume, even though it's tactical gear, military gear, stuff like that. So really like that. I just love the idea of like people being able to design their own costumes and turn up to work. Love that element, like you say, the fantasy element, the Lovecraftian side. I saw that as well. It must have been a bit of on a review or something, but I love that idea of military versus fantasy. So it creates a really interesting dynamic in the same way that some of the, yeah, I suppose some like Transformers films do, or all that sort of stuff. You know, or the any big budget sci-fi film. So that idea of military versus fantasy, you know, I really enjoyed it. I thought, yeah, so the aesthetic was a big part of it for me. Animation was good as well. I thought this was going to be that animation where everything is still except for the character's mouth.
Okay.
So it's a little bit, it looks a little bit like an animated comic book. Do you know the style I mean? Because I think that is sort of what the TV show is, but it's a little bit more smooth in this. It's a little bit more upscaled. So the animation style reminded me of the 90s Spider-Man series, which I loved. Have you ever seen that?
I haven't seen it, but I know, I've seen images of it.
Yeah, so it's the way for people at home. It's probably the one if you're about the same age as us that you'll have thought of that was on Fox Kids and had the theme tune by Aerosmith and was the first one to do Venom and all that sort of stuff. But it's all on Disney Plus, so if you fancy anything like that, it's still worth a watch. And it's one of those cartoons, a little bit like Batman the Animated Series, that sort of treads that line really well between kids and adults. So it reminded me of that style as well. So yeah, and like you said, it's fast paced, it's action packed, it's pretty non-stop. There's some good like quippy dialogue in there and stuff like that. I think for me, you know, if you were interested in this, if you're interested in the franchise, it probably ticks all the boxes for you. It did obviously it didn't tick those boxes for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm not interested in the target. I'm not interested in the original series, and I'm not the target audience. But I think what we try and do on this podcast, like we have done, particularly, you know, with other styles of films like your Cinderella stories and stuff like that, is come at it from, well, does this film is targeting a specific audience, right? It's not a broad appeal. It's you're going to seek this out because you're a fan type job. Would those people like it? I imagine so. Yeah, I imagine so. Yeah. But anyway, for you, what else? What else did you like? Watched it back.
So I actually thought the script was pretty good. And what I liked most about it is the sophisticated language used by a lot of the characters. So mostly those within Cobra-La. Like, appearances would suggest that this is very much a kid's film, but they don't end up fully pandering to the younger audience by dumbing down the language too much. And I do remember not understanding a lot of it when I was a kid, but understanding enough to obviously still enjoy it. And I think that really helped me enjoy it again, watching it back now in my 30s. They throw words in there like unsubstantiated, and one of them at one point says, "This is a character assassination." And those are just two examples from like a whole bunch that were going on throughout the film.
And all sorts.
just loads of stuff that you don't understand as a kid. It's like, I don't know. I was, what am I, 6 or 7 watching this? I don't know what a character assassination is.
Did you know? Well,
no, or unsubstantiated claims.
We were just colouring in the words character assassination and unsubstantiated.
And look at you now.
Look at me now. I can say unsubstantiated and character assassination. Yeah, go on. Sorry, what else?
So I do really like some of the characters and their aesthetic as well. So my favourite as a kid was obviously Pythona. I thought she was just the absolute coolest, but Nemesis Enforcer as well. I just love the look of them. And then with Nemesis Enforcer and then Globulus as well in particular. there is something just really quite menacing about them. Like they almost feel like these unstoppable forces of nature. But of course, they are stopped eventually by Action Force or G.I. Joe. And just finally, apart from the atrocious, borderline hilarious British accents of some of the characters, I do think the voice acting is really strong in this. So it feels like everyone really understands the assignment. It feels really well cast. And some of it is obviously, it's very loud and shouty and dramatic. And the actors don't shy away from this at all. And they all just sound like they're giving it their all. And that really came through through the screen for me. And I did just a little bit of research, but a lot of them are proper seasoned voice actors. And I think that really shows.
Yeah, rather than actors doing voice acting, they're actual voice actors. Yeah. Okay, then, so we'll move on to talking about things that we didn't like about the film or that we might change about the film. Alice, can you break your own heart? Is there anything you can say? Is there anything?
There is. There are a couple of things. So the biggest offender for me, and you mentioned it already, but it is all the laser fighting. Right. And it's just how this looks visually, right? A lot of the big fights that are happening in this are with lasers, and Jesus Christ, it became really difficult to watch at times. Like, I don't have any photosensitivity at all, but I found it uncomfortable. And sometimes it just felt so relentless and like I just wanted it to stop. And I really could have done with that being toned down a bit. It was too much.
You can't have too many lasers, though, can you?
Do you not think? I was going to say, what are your thoughts on that? Do you love the lasers?
Yeah, I suppose one of the things of it being so action-packed is it's sort of inevitably a bit repetitive. There's a lot of just one team of people running at another team of people and lasers flying everywhere. So, yeah, I do agree with that, yeah. As much as I love lasers, you can't have too many, I suppose.
Pew, 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 pew,
Anything else?
pew.
Anything else?
So there's a couple of bits that sort of relate a bit more to the story and how certain things were presented to us, or just little things that happened. So the first being, I don't think it's explained enough exactly what the broadcast energy transmitter is and does. So
I still don't know what it is.
Good. Okay, good. I'm not alone on this. So this is something that Action Force or G.I. Joe have. They say it's something that is going to solve the world's energy crisis, and it becomes a big plot point that Cobra-La then want to steal it because it will help set off a massive attack that they're going to do on planet Earth. But I don't get exactly why it's beneficial to G.I. Joe and the human race. Because they say it's like the solution to the world's energy crisis, but how? In what way? What is the solution? And maybe I was thinking maybe this is something that is explored in the TV show, but I don't know. So I could have done with a bit more exposition around that.
Give me some fake movie science.
Yeah,
it's the flange that does the spurbigator or whatever,
That's sorted. You've solved it in a sentence. Do you know what I mean? Because I fully understand Cobra's motivation to get it. Yeah. And the reason they want it is very clear. It's because they're setting off these poisonous spores into space. The BET will cause enough heat in space to make the spores fall back down to Earth. And then everybody sort of turns into a mutant or an animal sort of thing. But why it's not explained enough why it's beneficial to G.I. Joe specifically and the Globe, right? The other thing is that during the climax of the film, Sergeant Slaughter is really beating on Nemesis Enforcer, right? And he does hit him pretty hard, but he doesn't kill him. And then he throws him down a crevasse, and then that's the end of him. But he can fly. He's got massive wings.
Where's he
and
gone?
We've seen him flying in the rest of the film. So I didn't find that convincing. I needed more closure on his death.
You didn't find a WWE wrestler who existed in real life, but they put into the cartoon beating up a man with bird wings realistic?
That's my biggest issue. Just ruined it for me. Just threw me out of the film.
No, I know. Inconsistencies. That character's got to go, so they go, and that's that.
Yeah, it reminded me of, at the end of Superman 2, where Superman just sort of hits Zod and he slides off screen and then that's it. And then we don't see him again. Yeah. It's like, oh, that's the end of Zod. And I'm like, no, I need, for how pivotal the character is and how central they are to the whole film. Like Nemesis Enforcer is in it quite a lot.
Yeah.
and I would have wanted a proper death or some proper closure. I know obviously you can't, you got to be careful with what you're showing in these films or whatever directed at kids, but they just throw him down a hole and he's got wings and he's an expert flyer. So I just could have done with something a bit more convincing than that. And another thing that I didn't quite understand is, so there's a sequence where Beachhead is the guy who trains the new recruits who want to join G.I. Joe, right? So he's training some new recruits who want to become Joes and join the fight against Cobra. And they're keen for these recruits to get ahead as fast as possible because they're desperate for new soldiers, essentially. But when 2 of them complete the first obstacle course, Beachhead is absolutely fuming. Like, he seems to throw a bit of a strop just because they've completed the course, and that he's taking that as like a slight against him or something because they've outsmarted him.
Like he didn't make the course hard enough.
Well, exactly. And I suppose they're maybe trying to depict him as like a real hard ass and, he's really difficult to please or something. But it just didn't make any sense. Like, I think in the scene before, it might be Duke who's saying to him, yeah, we need these soldiers out of training as fast as possible. Like, we've just lost a group in the Himalayas. We need to replace them. Can you get these soldiers through training? They passed the first assault course. And he's like, like he's furious. I was just like, it doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I mean?
Congratulations, you passed your driving test.
Yeah, fuming.
Idiot.
For fuck's sake, I'm going to slash your tyres. Like, it was that sort of energy. But that was it. So, no massive offenders, maybe a few holes or inconsistencies. The lasers were the big thing for me. Could have done with less lasers. But that was sort of it. I mostly had a really enjoyable time. I did. I enjoyed it. And I told my brother the next day, I was like, mate, I watched this last night and it still bangs. And he started watching clips on it from YouTube as well. And hopefully he'll show his kids. What about you, Josh? What did you like?
So I've got a big one, a small one, and a question.
Okay. Ooh, fabulous.
So the question is, at the end, do they wipe out all of Cobra La? What do they do at the end? Or do they just capture them? Because it's unclear.
It is unclear.
Because if they wipe them out, they commit genocide.
Yes.
Yes, and it just made me go, couldn't they have come up with some sort of thing of like, and then we all share?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because but yeah, that might be just me being a bit wishy-washy. Then the small thing was Cobra Commander's voice is irritating.
Yeah.
I get the impression.
It's quite much, isn't it? It is
yeah,
much.
and I get the impression in the TV show he doesn't say that much.
Right.
But in this, he says a lot. To the point where
he's quite a main character, isn't he, really?
I just got sick of the sound of his voice.
Yeah,
it was just quite grating. Yeah. Then the big one, and there's no getting around it, and I've already touched on it. I don't know anything about the world, and obviously most of the characters are in the series and carried over to this, so I found it a bit hard to follow.
Yeah,
which
I totally get that.
Which I know is inevitable. It's like when you watch if you watch like a Pokemon movie and you don't know who anyone is. So this is what I mean. It is specifically made for fans of that series because you're not going to watch that if you don't know anything about the series, are you? Well, I don't imagine you are anyway. So yeah, bits of it were just hard to follow because there's a lot of characters.
There is a lot of characters, isn't there?
So apart from there were ones I couldn't tell you their names. I could be like, the main bad guy, the big guy. I knew Nemesis Enforcer because it's so memorable. The snake lady, it was just in my head. She was the snake lady.
Pythona. Pythona.
So because it was a pre-existing, product. I found it hard to follow, which I can, in the context of me not knowing anything about the series, it's not a massive criticism. It's just going into it not knowing anything. It's hard to follow. It's it's unavoidable. So nothing massive, but there's a couple of bits there. Okay, so we'll move on to talking about the critical reception very shortly. But first, Alice, I believe you're going to take us on a journey.
Oh, I am indeed, Josh and listeners. Prepare yourselves for a journey down the rabbit hole for this segment that I'm going to call Alice Down the Rabbit Hole. So, For this edition of Alice Down the Rabbit Hole, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the life and times of the man who played Snowjob in the film. And why have I picked him, I hear you ask? It's because his name is Robert Paulson. Paulson was born in Detroit in 1956. And if I told you he's been in every single cartoon ever since for the past 40 years, well, I would only be slightly exaggerating. From Action Force to Jimmy Neutron, SpongeBob to Ninja Turtles, this man has been in high demand. As a child, he loved singing and performing and eventually moved to LA in the 70s after dropping out of the University of Michigan to pursue a career in show business, and it sounds like it's been a complete whirlwind ever since, adding live-action movies and TV shows and video games to his repertoire, but always being in high demand for his voiceover work. In what must have felt like an incredibly cruel twist of fate, Robert was diagnosed with stage 3 throat cancer in 2016, but luckily his treatment was successful. Most recently, well, his undeniable talents didn't go unnoticed as he was hired as the voice director of The Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and as for the future, well, viewers will soon get to enjoy him in Avenging Justice, an animated sketch show starring Sean Astin and the absolute legend that is Billy West. And that was Alice Down the Rabbit Hole.
What was his name?
His name is Robert Paulson.
Okay, then. So let's move on to talking about the critical reception. Then we can see if we reckon this is underrated and underseen, because Alice has picked it for both reasons. I haven't seen the critical reception. Hard one, this to call, because I imagine if you're seeking this out to watch it as an audience member, you must like the text, right? So therefore, either it doesn't do justice to the text and you don't like it, or you do like it because it does justice to the text. So how do I think it's good? I reckon the critics probably weren't very kind to it. I reckon the audience probably were. So perhaps you're looking at sort of critics being in the 4s and the audience being in the 7s. So I'm going to say it averages out maybe like a straight down the middle 5 out of 10.
Okay, interesting. Do you think it's deserving of that?
No, I think that would be underrated. For me,
Okay.
you know, trying to put my mind in the context of if I was a fan, I'd say this is probably, it's a solid 6. So I think we're probably going to be looking at this being underrated. So go on, lay it on me.
Okie dokie. Well, at the time of recording over on IMDb, it gets 7 out of 10, which is probably where I'm about, right?
Yeah,
I am about there.
The stars just doing the heavy lifting.
Oh, absolutely. I was pleasantly surprised with that. Then over on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it 66%.
Yeah.
And then the critics, the main reason why I picked it, give it 43%, which I do think is incredibly harsh. And it only has 7 reviews from the critics, and a couple of them were just ratings with no actual comments at all. And there wasn't even enough information to write the critics' consensus part of the page, which I do believe adds to my argument of it being underseen. A lot of the films that we do, if you go on Rotten Tomatoes, you'll see you're looking at thousands of critic scores, usually
certainly
about 10,000.
Certainly hundreds.
Absolutely. You usually see maybe 10,000 critics, but then it's like hundreds of thousands of audience scores. And this was 7 critic scores.
Just 7. One for every day of the week.
What do you think about that?
For me, it's not. I don't think this is like an absolute shocker, but I think it is underrated. And I think based on the fact that it's a direct-to-DVD, direct-to-video even.
Come on.
Direct-to-Betamax release. Yes. I think that, and I hadn't seen it. I think it probably is. It probably is underseen because I think the only reason you're seeking this out is if you're a fan or a collector. So for me, I'm going to say underrated and underseen. What say you?
Excellent. I mean, yeah, I absolutely think that. I think even more after having watched it again. We only watched it by accident. I would absolutely love to know if anyone in the UK has actually seen this. I mean, definitely let us know if any of you have seen this. I would love to know, even our friends over in the States.
Put it out. Have you actually seen this?
Absolutely fascinated to know if anyone in the UK has seen this. Yeah. It's Action Force here, but G.I. Joe, the movie, over the pond.
Over the old States.
Well, there we go. I am incredibly satisfied with those results. Action Force / G.I. Joe, the movie, is underrated and underseen according to us. But I would absolutely love to know what you think about that, listeners, and if you've even seen it or heard of it.
Have you even seen this?
And who's your favourite character and why is it Pythona? Anyway, moving on. My favourite time of the week, as always, is when Josh gets to pick a film, because it usually it usually ends up bringing something into my life that I just never knew I needed.
Oh.
So, Josh, do tell us, what are you picking for next week? What are we going to be talking about?
It's a big one for me next week. It's a big one. It is its 10-year anniversary.
Okay.
And it is directly related to a film we did this time last year, almost exactly a year ago. Can you guess what it is? Or shall I just say?
Almost exactly a year ago.
And 10 years ago it was released.
I'm bad. Honestly, I'm bad at this. My sort of film general knowledge is poor.
All right. I can give you one more clue, or I can just tell you.
Give me a clue just to see if I can.
You mentioned it in the episode.
What, in this episode?
Yeah, you mentioned a factor of it in this episode.
Oh, the Hunchback?
No.
When I said that, no.
I'm not picking that again, am I? Just...
No, but it could have been something related to it. Oh, I don't know, Josh.
Okay. Next week, on its 10-year... On the 10-year anniversary of its release, not the date, just the year, and on a year on from talking about another film with the same character, we are going to be watching and talking about Man of Steel.
Oh,
yeah, it's a biggie. It's been on my list for a while.
Oh my God!
Excited?
I have got shit to say.
It could be a longer one next week, guys.
That
so
is
strap in. If you haven't seen Man of Steel, give it a watch, then tune in next week. But you've seen it, you know. Henry Cavill, he's buff, he's Superman. You know what I mean? It's flying, it's fighting, it's all that stuff. Join us next week when we're going to be talking about Man of Steel. In the meantime,
because I mentioned Superman 2, I've just realised because I mentioned Superman 2 on the Sunday.
In the meantime,
just got it.
In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on all the social medias. If you just search Just Films and That, you'll find us. Give us a follow. If you want to suggest a film, do get in touch. Heading over to the Patreon, as I mentioned before, the link's in the episode description. We're also on the old telly box, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. Every Superman on Friday the Superman. You can find us at the... No, sorry, I've got it on the brain now. Sorry. Yes, every Friday from 6 p.m. we are on the local TV network. That means that if you go to Freeview Channel 7 and you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool or the northeast of England, you can find us there. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. And I'm also uploading all the episodes to Dailymotion. So if you go on over there and search Just Films and That, our beautiful faces will pop up. We talk a lot about Superman, but then also other stuff as well.
Yes, lots of ways to hear us, see us, get in touch with us, and all that stuff. All that remains to be said is thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next week for a bit of Man of Steel. It's goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.